Daniel Harris had already buried the last hope he had for his dog when the blizzard finally eased. Molly had been gone 3 days. 3 days in winds that could freeze a grown man solid. He was preparing himself to find a body, not a miracle. But that morning, when he opened the cabin door, he saw a dark shape in the snow. It was Molly, barely breathing, and she wasn't alone. 3 small, trembling shadows were curled against her belly, shadows with tufted ears and wild, frightened eyes. Before Daniel could take a step, one of them hissed, and something behind the tree line hissed back. The storm had finally passed, leaving behind a world carved out of silence. Snow draped every tree and buried every path, smoothing the rugged Wyoming hillside into something pale and endless. Dawn hadn't fully risen yet, just a thin ribbon of gray light stretching across the sky, when Daniel Harris unlatched the cabin door and stepped into the cold. The moment he opened it, he froze. There, halfway down the slope behind his cabin, lay a dark shape against the untouched snow. At first, it didn't register. His brain refused to process what his eyes were seeing. It was too still, too small, too wrong. Then the shape shifted just enough to break his breath loose from his lungs. "Molly," he whispered. His old golden retriever was collapsed in the snow, her thick coat stiff with ice, her body curled into a tight arc. For a horrifying heartbeat, he thought she was gone, but then her head lifted an inch, just an inch, and her tail gave one slow, trembling wag. Daniel stumbled forward, boots punching into drifts nearly up to his knees. His heart hammered as he closed the distance, half sliding, half falling down the slope. When he reached her, he dropped to his knees so hard the impact jolted up his spine. "Molly, girl, what did you do? What happened to you?" She didn't answer, of course. She only raised her cloudy, gentle eyes toward him, holding his gaze with a mixture of exhaustion and something else. Something like urgency. As Daniel leaned closer, he finally noticed what her body was wrapped around. 3 tiny shapes, 3 small spotted bodies pressed so tight against her belly, they were nearly hidden beneath the thick gold of her fur. He blinked once, twice. "Are those?" They were. 3 bobcat kittens, no bigger than squirrels, ribs showing, fur clumped with ice crystals. 2 lifted their small triangular faces, ears tipped with black tufts, and stared at him with wide, frightened eyes. The 3rd barely moved, its breathing shallow and shaky, as if each rise and fall of its tiny chest was a negotiation with death. Daniel felt the shock hit him like a second storm. "What on earth, Molly? What did you do out here?" She answered by nudging the weakest kitten closer to her with her nose, a gentle push that nearly broke him. Her body was shaking violently from the cold, her breath fogging weakly in the air. She had spent herself down to the last thread of strength trying to keep the 3 little creatures alive through the blizzard. A blizzard she should never have survived at her age. A blizzard she had vanished into 3 days ago. 3 days. He swallowed hard, the memory hitting him like a blow. 3 days of calling her name into the wind, 3 days of stumbling through whiteout conditions, 3 days of fearing he'd lost the last living piece of his wife, Emily. 3 days of imagining every worst possibility, wolves, cold, cliffs, exhaustion. But never, not once, had he imagined this. He reached out and touched Molly's head. Her fur was so cold it burned his fingertips. "Okay, girl, hold on. I've got you. I'll get you home." She closed her eyes, trusting him completely. Too completely. The kind of trust that frightened him because it meant she was letting go of the fight, believing he would take over. He couldn't waste another second. Daniel shrugged off his jacket and wrapped it around the kittens first. They mewled weakly, claws pricking the fabric as they tried to burrow deeper into the warmth. Then he slid his arms under Molly's limp body, lifting her carefully. God, she felt so much heavier when she couldn't hold herself up, and held her against his chest. The kittens went with them, bundled in his coat, kept close to her body the way she clearly wanted. His boots sank deep as he trudged back up the slope, lungs burning, legs shaking from the effort. But he kept moving, fueled by the same stubbornness that had carried him through years of search and rescue missions. He would not fail her. Not now. Not ever. Inside the cabin, the heat smacked against his face like a blessing. He laid Molly down near the fireplace, layering blankets over her and placing the bundled kittens beside her chest. She nudged them weakly, checking each one before resting her head again. They were still alive. Barely. And so was she. Barely. He stoked the fire until flames roared, then knelt beside his old girl, brushing snow from her fur with shaking hands. The room filled with the crackle of burning logs, the faint mews of the kittens, and the soft, raspy sound of Molly's breath. Somewhere between those sounds, between fear and wonder, something else stirred. Something Daniel hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Thin, trembling, and fragile. But hope nonetheless. He sat back, breath unsteady, heart thudding with disbelief. 3 days gone. 3 days in a deadly blizzard. And she came back with bobcats? What in God's name had happened out there? He looked around the cabin as if expecting Emily to step from the shadows, laughing in disbelief, telling him to start explaining, but there was only the fire's glow and Molly's labored breathing. Before he could gather himself, the smallest bobcat made a weak chirping sound, barely audible, barely alive. Molly heard it instantly. Despite everything, she moved her nose across the kitten's back, checking it, reassuring it. Something squeezed Daniel's chest. Hard. Even now, half frozen and dying, Molly was protecting creatures she should have feared. The weight of that hit him so sharply he had to steady himself against the floor. He leaned closer to her and whispered, "You're a miracle, girl, but please don't give up yet. Not after everything." The fire crackled. Outside, the world remained silent and white. Inside, 5 fragile lives clung to the thin line between survival and loss. And as Daniel watched the oldest of the kittens lift its trembling head and stare back at him, wild-eyed, frightened, yet somehow trusting, he felt the story shifting beneath his feet, carrying him somewhere he hadn't expected to go again, somewhere he wasn't sure he was ready for. He swallowed, exhaled slowly, and said into the quiet cabin, "If you're still with us, you're part of a remarkable community here at Whispering Hearts, where real stories of extraordinary animal connections come to life. Every subscriber helps us share more heart-touching moments that reveal the power of compassion across species. Don't forget to hit subscribe, because the journey ahead is one you'll feel long after the story ends." Then he placed another log on the fire and looked down at Molly, at the kittens pressed against her. He didn't know how she found them. He didn't know why she risked everything. He didn't know what the next hours would bring. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was only the beginning. Long before Molly collapsed in the snow with 3 wild kittens tucked against her heart, the cabin on the ridge had been a place of echoing quiet. Quiet so deep it sometimes felt like another weather system rolling through. One Daniel Harris could neither predict nor escape. 4 years earlier, the mountains had taken what mattered most to him. Back then, Daniel was still part of the Teton search and rescue team. One of the veterans, steady hands, calm voice, the guy younger rescuers tried to mimic. Emily, his wife of 30 years, was the team's medical lead. Where Daniel was steady and quiet, Emily was warm and disarmingly alive, the kind of person who made strangers feel like they'd met before. They had spent a lifetime climbing mountains together, pulling strangers out of ravines, braving storms that would make most people lock their doors and pray. Danger was part of the rhythm of their life, but it had always felt like something they could outsmart together, until the day they couldn't. It happened on a late October climb, a freak storm dropping in like a sledgehammer. They were descending with a small group of hikers who had underestimated the early season conditions. Rain turned to sleet, sleet to biting ice. The wind was deafening. Daniel remembered shouting over the gale, counting heads, gripping the lifeline rope. He remembered Emily's voice, sharp, urgent, telling the line to move faster. He remembered the blinding white that swallowed the world, and then nothing but the sound of rope snapping against rock. A scream swallowed by wind, the shape of Emily slipping out of sight so fast his brain couldn't catch up before her body disappeared into the storm. The following hours blurred into something jagged and fragmented, searching until his legs gave out, screaming her name until his throat turned to fire, the crushing realization that nothing he did would matter now. They found her the next day, when the storm cleared, lying peacefully as if sleeping, snowflakes gathering on her eyelashes. Daniel never forgot the expression she wore, as if she forgave him before he asked. He never forgave himself. The mountains didn't feel like home after that. They felt like a mouth with sharp teeth, capable of taking anything it wanted. Still, Daniel couldn't leave them. Leaving felt like abandoning her. Staying felt like punishment. So he made an uneasy compromise. He retired early, bought a small cabin on the ridge far from the team headquarters, and cut the world down to something he could survive. Just him. A radio he rarely turned on. And Molly. She had belonged to Emily first, a rescue dog with good instincts and a softness that seemed to belong to a gentler world. After Emily's death, Molly slept by the door for weeks, waiting for footsteps that would never come. Then she turned to Daniel, as though deciding he needed guarding more than the empty doorway did. In an odd way, they rescued each other, two creatures learning how to keep going when half their world was missing. Over time, though, grief settled into Daniel like sediment. Days slid by in long stretches of sharp silence, broken only by the crackle of firewood or Molly's tail thumping against the rug. He cooked because he had to, slept because his body demanded it, walked Molly along the ridge because old habits were hard to kill. But his heart had retreated somewhere deep, a place even he couldn't reach. Others tried. For a while. His son, Evan, called from Denver every week at first, checking in, urging him to come down for a while, telling him, "Dad, nobody blames you." But grief makes you mistrust comfort, and Daniel kept conversations short until eventually the calls came only around holidays. Neighbors offered dinners and small-town kindness, but Daniel politely declined until they stopped asking. That left only one person who hadn't been discouraged: Nora Park. She had been one of the paramedics on Daniel and Emily's rescue team years ago. Smart, young, driven, Emily used to say Nora had a heart big enough to drown in. After Emily died, Nora left the rescue unit and became a veterinarian in Jackson Hole. Something she'd always wanted, but kept postponing. She called now and then, not intrusive, just checking in, reminding him that he still had people. But Daniel always kept the conversations shallow. He didn't know how to hold grief and company at the same time. And then came the text just a few weeks before the storm. "I'm thinking about driving up soon. Haven't seen you in ages. Don't hide from us forever." He hadn't replied. He didn't know how. Molly understood the rhythms of Daniel's silence better than anyone. She followed him from room to room like a quiet guardian, watching the door at 5 p.m. every day, the exact time Emily used to walk in from her shift. At first, Daniel found it heartbreaking. Then it became part of their shared routine, a small ritual of remembering. Sometimes Molly would rest her head on Daniel's knee in those moments, and he would place a hand on her fur without looking at her. Neither of them needed to speak. The missing was the same. As winter tightened its grip on the mountains, Daniel found himself withdrawing further. He spent long hours splitting wood, repairing small things around the cabin that didn't need repairing, losing himself in physical tasks because they were easier than thinking. He felt the storm before the forecast announced it. The heaviness in the air, the taste of cold on the wind, the way the sky whitened at the edges. He prepared like he always did. Stacked wood high, checked emergency lights, secured windows. But Molly sensed something else. She sat at the door that night, her ears alert, tail still, eyes fixed toward the north ridge, the very place where Emily had been lost. When Daniel called her to lie down, she didn't move. Instead, she gave a low whine, deep in her throat, a sound he had heard only a handful of times. It was the sound she used on rescue missions when she had found someone buried under snow. Daniel tried to shake it off, telling himself she was reacting to pressure changes or the storm's early rumblings. He built up the fire and settled into his chair, trying to ignore her pacing, her restless movements, the way she kept glancing at him as if asking permission to do something she couldn't communicate. He must have dozed off. He wasn't sure how long he slept, only that when he woke, the cabin was colder than it should have been. Too quiet, too still, and the front door was open. Just an inch, just enough for a golden-furred body to slip through. "Molly?" His voice had cracked on the second syllable. Snow had blown in through the gap, forming a small drift on the floor. Outside, the wind howled with a force that made the door shudder in its hinges. He grabbed his coat, stumbled out into the raging white, calling her name until his voice disappeared into the storm. But the blizzard swallowed sound and hope with equal hunger. He searched until he could no longer stand, every old injury in his body screaming for mercy. He searched until night swallowed the ridge. He searched until he couldn't remember the last time he felt anything but cold. When the storm finally lifted on the morning of the third day, he was ready to face the truth he had dreaded for years. The mountains had taken something from him again. And then he saw the dark shape in the snow, the shape that changed everything. The night the storm arrived, the ridge felt uneasy, like the mountains were holding their breath. Daniel had felt that kind of tension before during his years in search and rescue, when a storm was building with enough force to reshape the land itself. The air tasted metallic, and the wind carried a warning in every sharp gust. He tightened the last shutter on the cabin and brushed snow off his gloves. The sky above him churned in restless gray spirals, thickening by the minute. Down the slope, the trees bowed under the first heavy whispers of snow. Winter storms were common in Wyoming, but this one had the weight of something different, something meaner. Inside, Molly paced from door to window, her nails tapping the floor in a nervous rhythm. Daniel noticed immediately. She wasn't a nervous dog by nature. She'd weathered storms far worse than this. But tonight, her body was tight, her breaths short, her eyes never leaving the northern ridge, the same place where Emily had vanished into the blizzard years earlier. "All right, girl," Daniel murmured as he tossed another log onto the fire. "It's just a storm. We've ridden out plenty." But Molly didn't settle. She stood at the heavy wooden door, ears pricked, tail straight, muscles quivering with a readiness Daniel couldn't make sense of. When he approached her, she nudged the door with her nose, then looked back at him as if asking him to open it. "No," he said gently. "Not tonight." Outside, the wind began its long howl, rattling the gutters, sweeping across the cabin walls like a living thing. Snowflakes the size of feathers pressed against the windows, accumulating faster than Daniel had ever seen this early in the storm. He stirred the fire, trying to calm his own nerves. Molly paced again, stopped, paced once more, then let out a low, throaty whine. It was the kind of sound Daniel had heard only during rescue missions, when Molly had found someone under snow or trapped behind fallen timber, when she sensed distress so deeply it pulled a cry right out of her chest. "You're picking up something out there, aren't you?" he whispered. She looked at him, really looked, eyes deep with urgency. But Daniel shook his head and walked away, unable to bear the idea that anything in the northern ridge could still hold power over him. He was done with storms, done with rescues, done with trying to read danger in the wind the way he used to. He tried to convince himself Molly was reacting to old instincts, that animals felt shifts in pressure or sensed predators moving miles away. Anything was easier than believing the ridge was calling her, or him, back into something they weren't ready to face. He made soup he didn't finish, scrubbed a countertop that was already clean, pretended not to hear Molly pacing by the door. When he finally sat down beside the fire, exhaustion pulled at him like heavy ropes. The storm roared, shaking loose memories he'd spent years trying to bury. He closed his eyes, letting the fire's warmth lull him, and drifted into a restless sleep. He didn't know how long he slept. Minutes, hours. But when the cabin's sudden chill wrapped around him like cold hands, he jolted awake. The fire was low, the room too quiet, and the front door was open. Only an inch, just enough for a determined dog to slip through. Daniel's heart slammed into his ribs. "Molly!" He stumbled toward the door, boots skidding on the small drift of snow blown inside. The wind blasted the cabin as he yanked the door open wider, the cold tearing right through him. Snowfall whipped his face in sharp, stinging flakes. He cupped his hands around his mouth and shouted into the storm, but the gale ripped his voice away instantly. For a moment, he saw nothing, just white chaos spinning in every direction. He stepped off the porch, sinking to his shins in snow already deeper than it had any right to be. The storm howled with a savage kind of fury, pushing him sideways as he fought to keep his footing. "Molly!" Nothing, only the screaming wind. He scanned the slope, looking for movement, shadow, anything, but the world was a wall of white. Snow erased trails in seconds. Even a dog's footprint wouldn't last long in this kind of storm. He waded forward anyway, each step a battle, calling her name until his voice grew raw. His breath froze on his beard. The cold gnawed at his fingers through his gloves. He moved like a man possessed, fueled only by fear and a desperate, foolish hope. But the ridge offered him nothing. No sound, no tracks, no golden shape pushing through the snow toward him. Just emptiness, white and merciless. After nearly an hour, the gale knocked his legs out from under him and sent him crashing down. He lay there in the snow, gasping, his muscles shaking from the struggle against the storm. For a moment, he thought he saw movement through the swirling white, something darting near the tree line, a small shadow, then another, but the wind shifted, blurring everything into one indistinguishable blur. He forced himself up, knowing he could not survive much longer out here, not in this, not with visibility nearly zero. He staggered back toward the cabin, every step colder, heavier, emptier. Inside, he slammed the door shut and leaned his forehead against the wood, eyes closed. Snow melted down his face and beard, dripping onto the floor. His breath came in ragged bursts. "She went out there," he whispered to the empty cabin. "Why would she go out there?" He checked the door latch. He checked the windows. He checked the back entrance. Everywhere, the truth stayed the same. Molly had left on purpose. As night thickened, Daniel paced the cabin like he was trapped inside a memory, replaying Emily slipping into the storm, replaying every rescue he'd ever led, every life he'd ever carried back home. He tried to force sleep, but every time he closed his eyes, he saw Molly vanishing into the white. He kept the lantern burning, tended the fire, listened to the storm rage. By dawn, exhaustion pulled him into a brief, broken sleep, head resting on the table, boots still on. On the second day, the storm grew stronger. Snow hammered the cabin with a fury that made the walls shudder. Daniel opened the door twice to check, but the wind nearly knocked him off his feet. He couldn't go out again. He wouldn't make it back. That night, he sat in Emily's old rocking chair and held Molly's rescue harness, something he'd kept for years, tucked away in the closet. He ran his thumb over the worn stitching, the frayed edges, the faded patches. His vision blurred until the harness trembled in his hands. "I should have gone with you," he whispered, though he wasn't sure whether he meant Emily or Molly. On the morning of the third day, the storm quieted. Not stopped, just tired. Daniel grabbed his coat, his boots, his emergency kit. He wasn't going out to search for a survivor. He was going out to bring her home, to bring back whatever was left. He opened the door and froze. A dark shape lay in the snow. Molly, broken, frozen, and not alone. The world shifted under him. This was no simple disappearance. This was no accident. This was the beginning of something he could not yet understand. For most people, a storm is just weather. For Daniel, storms were memories, loud, cold, and merciless. They carried the shape of Emily's last breath, the sound of rope snapping, the helplessness of watching someone disappear into white nothingness. And now, after Molly vanished into the blizzard, the storm once again became a thing with teeth. The first day after she disappeared, he fought it. He wrapped a rope around his waist, tied the other end to the porch post, an old search and rescue habit, and stepped back into the wall of snow. The wind hit him so violently it shoved the breath right out of his lungs. He pressed forward anyway, leaning his body against the gale, boots forcing paths into knee-deep drifts. He called Molly's name until his throat burned, the sound stolen instantly by the wind. He moved in tight circles, then larger ones, always keeping the rope tight so he wouldn't lose his way. Snow blinded his vision, stung his cheeks, soaked into his gloves. His footprints vanished behind him within seconds. After an hour, his beard had frozen stiff. After 2 hours, he could no longer feel his fingertips. After 3, he knew what his training told him. If he stayed out any longer, he risked becoming another body the mountains claimed. He hated himself for retreating, hated the warmth of the cabin, hated the fire for burning when Molly might be freezing somewhere alone. But he had to survive long enough to try again. That night, he sat by the window with a lantern, staring into the swirling white, refusing to sleep, refusing to blink too long, terrified he might miss her returning. The storm kept coming, stronger, louder, crueler. Snow beat against the glass so hard he checked twice for cracks. He whispered into the dark, "Hold on, girl. Please hold on." He didn't know if he was praying or begging or simply unraveling. By the second day, the storm had grown monstrous, wind screaming as if enraged, trees bending like supplicants before something greater than themselves. Even the cabin groaned under the pressure, its old wooden frames shuddering. Snow drifts piled against the windows, swallowing the bottom panes. Daniel tried again to venture out, opening the door just enough to feel the wind claw at him. It nearly knocked him backward. The visibility was worse than the day before. Even the porch railing disappeared into a void of white. He slammed the door shut before the storm could rip it from its hinges. He stood there for a long time, forehead pressed against the doorframe, breath shaky. He was losing her. He knew it, and he had no power to stop it. A crackle from the radio startled him. Daniel stepped toward it, thinking maybe, just maybe, it was Molly's tag hitting something, some miracle transmission. Instead, a familiar gravelly voice filled the cabin. "Dan, you up there? You hear me?" Jack Turner. Jack lived 2 miles down the ridge, gruff, weather-worn, a man who'd spent half his life tracking game and the other half trying to convince people he didn't care about anything. But Daniel knew better. Jack cared too much. He just hid it behind a face carved out of bark. Daniel picked up the radio. "I hear you. You seen any tracks? My hounds are restless. Something's been moving through the north woods." Daniel's stomach tightened. "What kind of something?" "Lynx. Maybe bobcat. Hard to tell with this miss. Prints are small, close together. Could be young." A strange feeling prickled through Daniel. Fear, confusion. something else he couldn't name. "Jack, why would kittens be out in a storm like this?" Jack grunted. "Because whatever was raising them ain't raising them anymore. Storm like this? Lots of things die." Daniel closed his eyes, gripping the radio tighter. "Jack, Molly's gone." Silence. Heavy, respectful silence. Then Jack said quietly, "I'll keep an eye out, but Dan, don't go doing something stupid. You know what this weather can do." Daniel didn't answer. He didn't promise anything. He simply set the radio down and walked away. That night, the quiet inside the cabin felt heavier than the storm outside. Daniel sat with Molly's old rescue harness on his lap, tracing the faded fabric, the worn edges, the patch Emily had sewn on the side years ago. He remembered the way Molly used to run ahead of the team, tail high, nose low, ears alert, always believing she could bring someone home. Now she was the one who needed saving. The thought hollowed him out. He slept in bursts, head jerking up each time the cabin creaked. Once, he thought he heard scratching at the door and jumped up, heart slamming, only to find nothing there but wind-driven ice. On the morning of the third day, the storm relented. Not fully, but enough to breathe. The wind quieted to a whistle instead of a scream. Snow still fell, but gently now, like a tired sigh. The world lay buried beneath an endless white blanket, sculpted into strange shapes by the storm's rage. Daniel didn't waste a second. He dressed in layers, grabbed his pack and emergency gear, strapped on his snowshoes. He paused only once, looking at the empty spot by the door where Molly always sat waiting to go out. The sight cut him cleanly, like a blade. "I'm coming for you, girl," he whispered. "Don't be gone yet." He stepped outside and felt the silence hit him like an echo. The sky was pale, washed out, exhausted from the fight. Snow was piled so high he barely recognized his own yard. Trees bowed low, weighted with white. The world gleamed with a cold beauty he was in no shape to appreciate. He tightened the straps on his pack, ready to begin the grim task of searching for her body. But he never took that first step. Because 20 feet down the slope, half buried in the snow, the slope he had stared at for 3 days without seeing anything, there was a shadow, a dark, unmoving shape he knew as well as he knew his own heartbeat. Molly. He dropped to his knees. His gloves hit the snow. He crawled the rest of the way, breath coming in ragged bursts. She wasn't just collapsed in the snow, she was curled around something. 3 somethings. 3 tiny, spotted bodies, and the world tilted under Daniel's feet as understanding crashed into him. This wasn't just a rescue. This wasn't just survival. Molly had chosen to leave, chosen to fight, chosen to save these fragile, wild little lives. Everything he thought he knew about what happened during the storm shattered into something far more complicated and far more miraculous. 3 days ago, he thought he had already lived the worst the mountains could take from him. He never imagined they would return something instead. Molly lifted her head weakly when he reached her. One slow wag of her tail broke him completely. He whispered, "Hold on, girl, I've got you." But even as he scooped her into his arms, feeling the cold in her fur, the tremble in her breaths, he knew this was only the beginning. Something had happened out there in the storm, something he didn't understand yet, something bigger than fear or grief or the mountain's cruel indifference. And whatever it was, it had brought Molly home with 3 bobcat kittens pressed against her like they belonged to her, like she had chosen them, like she had fought for them, like they were hers. Daniel had carried many bodies out of snow before, injured hikers, frostbitten skiers, lost hunters, but never had he carried anything like this. His old dog, limp with cold, wrapped around 3 tiny bobcat kittens who had no business being alive. The weight of Molly in his arms was familiar yet frightening. She felt heavier than usual, as if every ounce of strength she had left was clinging to his jacket. The kittens were bundled inside his coat, their tiny claws gripping the fabric, their thin breaths warming the space against his chest. One let out a weak, rasping chirp. Another didn't move at all. Daniel's heart lurched every time he felt the smallest one's frail body tremble. "Stay with me," he muttered, not sure whether he meant Molly, the kittens, or himself. The walk back up the slope took ages, though it was only 50 feet. Snow dragged at his boots. His knees buckled twice. His lungs burned with every breath. But he never stopped. He couldn't. Not now. Inside the cabin, heat wrapped around him like a blanket he didn't deserve. He shut the door with his boot and hurried to the fireplace, lowering Molly onto a pile of blankets. She shivered once, barely. Her breath came in shallow pulls. "Easy, girl," he whispered. "I'm here." Next, he unwrapped the kittens, laying them beside her flank. They huddled close instantly, instinct pulling them into her warmth. The smallest one, its fur patchy and its breathing faint, barely lifted its head. Molly nudged that one first, pushing her nose under its belly, trying to curl herself around it. "You found them out there," Daniel murmured, staring in disbelief. "God knows how, but you did." He tossed more wood into the fire and rushed to warm towels, checking the kittens' bodies for injuries the way he'd once checked victims on mountain calls. Their ribs stuck out like tiny ridges. Their paws were red where the cold had bitten into them. The smallest kitten had a wound along its side, ragged like the bite of something bigger. Fear prickled up Daniel's spine. "What attacked you, little one?" A bobcat mother wouldn't wound her own kitten like that, not unless something had gone terribly wrong. He crouched beside Molly, who lifted her eyes weakly toward him. She wasn't guarding the kittens. Not from him. But she watched them constantly, nudging the smallest one whenever its breath grew too faint. He could feel it in her gaze. She wasn't asking permission. She was asking for help. "I'm here," he whispered. "I'll do everything I can." He worked quickly. Years of emergency training never truly left a man. He warmed small bowls of water, feeding droplets to Molly using a spoon, holding it to her mouth until she swallowed. Then he mixed a soft blend of scrambled eggs and warm milk, something gentle enough for starving bodies, and offered it to the kittens. To his shock, one kitten, its fur the darkest of the three, crawled forward, sniffed the plate, then dug in with tiny, desperate bites. Another followed, though slower, trembling between each mouthful. The smallest kitten didn't move. "Come on, sweetheart," Daniel coaxed, touching its tiny jaw. "Just try." But it didn't respond. Its eyes were dull blue, unfocused. Fear tightened Daniel's throat. Losing Molly would have gutted him. Losing this fragile, struggling creature, the one Molly had nearly died protecting, was suddenly just as unthinkable. He looked at the wound again, then at the kitten's shallow breaths. This wasn't something he could handle alone, not with the resources he had here. He reached for the old landline phone on the counter and dialed the only person he trusted with anything this delicate. Nora Park answered on the second ring. "Daniel? I was just thinking about—" "Nora," he interrupted, voice shaking. "It's Molly and something else." Her tone shifted instantly. "What happened?" He told her everything. The disappearance, the storm, finding Molly in the snow with 3 bobcat kittens tucked against her like they were birthed from her body. He tried to keep his voice steady, but cracks slipped through. He explained the injuries, the cold, the smallest kitten barely breathing. When he finished, Nora didn't speak for several seconds. Then, "I'm on my way." "You shouldn't drive. The roads—" "I've driven worse," she said sharply. "Keep them warm. Keep them together. Don't separate the smallest one from Molly. I'll be there as fast as the plow trucks let me." She hung up before he could argue. Daniel turned back to the small circle of life gathered near the fire. Never had his cabin felt so full and so terrifyingly fragile. The kitten's faint mews blended with the crackle of the fire, a strange harmony that tugged at something deep inside him, something that had been frozen for years. He adjusted the blankets and placed his hand gently on Molly's side, feeling the slight rise and fall of her breath. "You brave girl," he whispered. "What were you doing out there?" Molly didn't answer, but the emotions in her tired eyes were unmistakable. Fear, exhaustion, and a fierce protective instinct he had never seen burn so bright in her before. Outside, the world was still buried under white, but the storm clouds were lifting. A faint line of pale sky peeked through. Almost an hour passed before Daniel heard the distant rumble of an engine climbing the mountain road. He stepped outside as Nora's SUV pulled up, tires crunching against deep snow. She shoved the door open, bundled in a parka, snow dusting her hat. "Where are they?" she asked, breath forming clouds in the cold. "Inside." She followed him in, her eyes widening the moment she saw Molly curled around the kittens. She knelt immediately beside them. "Oh, Molly," she whispered, touching the old dog's head gently. Then she inspected each kitten with swift, practiced hands. When she examined the smallest one, her brows knit. "This one's in bad shape, dehydrated, hypothermic. And this wound," she traced it lightly. "Something attacked them, probably whatever killed their mother." Daniel swallowed. "Can you save it?" Nora didn't lie. She never had. "I don't know, but I'll try." She reached into her medical bag, drawing out saline fluids, a tiny needle, disinfectant. She cleaned the kitten's wound with delicate precision, wincing each time it whimpered. Then she administered fluids under its skin, the small body twitching weakly. Molly watched everything, eyes following each movement. When the kitten cried out, she let out a soft, rumbling whine. Nora sat back finally, exhaling. "The next few hours will tell us everything. If it makes it through the night, its chances go up." Daniel nodded, feeling a heavy ache that was equal parts fear and gratitude. "And the others?" he asked. "They're hungry, but strong enough." Nora gently stroked Molly's fur. "But Daniel, these are wild bobcats. Keeping them here isn't exactly legal. I'm not throwing them back out there." "I didn't say you should." Nora's voice softened. "Just, we need to be careful and realistic." Daniel looked at Molly, at the kittens pressed against her chest. "They're alive because of her. I won't let them die now." Nora held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded. "Then we'll do this together." For the first time since the storm began, Daniel felt something shift in the cabin. Something small and warm, like a light flickering to life. He didn't understand what had driven Molly into the blizzard or how she had found those kittens. But as the smallest one breathed, just a bit steadier, he knew this was no random miracle. Something extraordinary had happened out there in the storm, and now 3 wild hearts slept beside his old dog, their lives bound to hers and to his in a way he could not yet comprehend. The days that followed settled into a rhythm Daniel never expected. Strange, tender, and quieter than anything he'd known in years. The storm had passed, but its aftermath lived inside the cabin in the form of 3 spotted kittens who clung to Molly as if she were the only mother they had ever known. And in a way, she was. On the first morning after Nora's emergency care, the smallest kitten, the one with the ragged wound, opened its eyes fully for the first time. They were still dull and cloudy, but the faint spark of life behind them made Daniel exhale a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Well, look at you," he whispered, placing his hand near it so it could smell him. The kitten lifted its tiny head and made a fragile chirp, a sound so soft it barely existed. Molly responded immediately, pressing her nose against its side in a way that felt more deliberate than instinctive, as though she understood how close this little creature had come to leaving them. The other 2 kittens were recovering quickly, scrawny, wild-eyed, unsure. of the cabin but fiercely attached to Molly. They slept against her belly, climbed over her back, pawed at her ears. She tolerated it all. Sometimes she even wagged her tail softly, the tip tapping the blankets like a quiet metronome. Daniel watched them with a mixture of awe and disbelief. "How did you survive out there?" he murmured to Molly as she cleaned one kitten's face with slow, patient strokes. "What did you see?" She didn't answer, but the calm in her eyes made him feel something he hadn't felt in years. Steady. As the days passed, he began to see each kitten's personality emerge. The bigger male, bold and quick, claimed a spot by Molly's neck and guarded it with the seriousness of a tiny soldier. The female, sleek, alert, always watching, followed every movement in the cabin, her instincts sharp despite her size. And the smallest kitten, the one who'd almost died, stayed pressed to Molly like a second heartbeat. Daniel found himself talking to them the way he used to talk to Emily when they were alone on long rescue missions. Softly, honestly, without thinking. Nora visited every other day, driving up through the frozen roads with bags of supplies and a professional calm that soothed the anxious edges of the cabin. "They're stabilizing," she reported one afternoon after checking them over. "The little one's wound is healing better than I hoped. Molly's temperature is normal now. She still won't leave their side," Daniel said. Nora smiled. "Would you?" She knelt beside Molly, stroking her head gently. "You did something incredible, girl." Molly licked her hand, but Nora's expression sobered as she turned to Daniel. "You know what I have to remind you, right?" "About the law?" he said quietly. "About the law," she confirmed. "Keeping bobcats in a private home isn't just discouraged, it's illegal. And if someone reports this, they'll be taken away." Daniel looked at Molly curled around the kittens. "They won't survive without her." "I know," Nora said softly. "Which is why, for now, I'm not reporting anything, but this can't stay a secret forever." Daniel didn't respond. He couldn't. The thought of anyone taking the kittens, or Molly losing them, made something cold settle in his chest. That night, he set up a small enclosed pen outside the cabin, using lumber and mesh he'd salvaged over the years. It wasn't meant to trap them. It was meant to give them space and fresh air without danger. The wild was their birthright, but they weren't ready for it. When he carried them outside for the first time, one at a time tucked inside his coat, they tensed at the cold, but then lifted their little faces, sniffing the breeze with curiosity. Molly trotted behind, still stiff from her ordeal, but insistent on supervising. The bigger male pounced on a clump of snow. The female tested her claws on a fallen log. The smallest curled beside Molly's front paw, content just to exist. For the first time since the storm, the ridge felt alive to Daniel. Not just a place of loss, but a place of new beginnings. But the secrecy weighed on him. He kept the curtains drawn now. He refused to let the kittens roam near the windows. Even when he went outside to split wood, he found himself listening for approaching engines, scanning the tree line out of habit. The world was small up there, and word traveled faster than weather. And despite Daniel's efforts, despite his caution, the secret didn't stay secret. It began with a knock. Daniel stiffened when he heard it, the kind of stiffening that comes when trouble announces itself too early in a story. He opened the door to find Jack Turner standing on the porch, boots covered in snow, a chainsaw slung over his shoulder. "Morning," Jack grunted. "Need to borrow that spare fuel can of yours?" Daniel stepped aside before thinking, letting Jack into the cabin the way people in the mountains often did. Automatic hospitality, even when your gut screamed otherwise. But the moment Jack stepped inside, everything changed. He froze. His eyes narrowed. His jaw dropped the smallest bit. Because there, in the middle of the cabin floor, all three kittens were playing in broad daylight, tumbling over one another while Molly watched them like a satisfied grandmother. Jack set the chainsaw down slowly. Dan, what in the damn mountains is that? Daniel's stomach dropped. They're kittens, he said, voice tightening. Those ain't barn cats, Jack said. Those are bobcats. I know. How long have you been? 3 days, Daniel said quickly. Molly found them in the storm. Saved them. Jack looked from the kittens to Molly, then to Daniel. Confusion softened into something closer to pity, then concern. You can't keep them, he said quietly. That's not how this works. They'll die without her. Maybe, Jack said. But if someone reports this, they won't, Daniel cut in. Jack sighed, rubbing a hand across his face. Dan, I like you. I liked Emily. I'm not trying to cause trouble, but this is trouble. Daniel's pulse hammered. Please, don't say anything. Jack looked at Molly again. She didn't snarl or hide the kittens. She simply wagged her tail once, as if greeting an old friend. Jack blew out a heavy breath. I won't say a word, but someone else might. Be careful, Dan. He left without another glance. Daniel stood in the doorway long after Jack had disappeared down the slope, heart pounding. The secret wasn't gone, not yet, but it was exposed, uneasy, vulnerable. And in small mountain towns, secrets didn't have long to live. That night, as Daniel watched the kittens curl against Molly's chest, he realized something he hadn't wanted to admit. Trouble was coming, and the fragile little family in his cabin, wild, extraordinary, impossible, wasn't ready, but neither was he. The knock came 3 days after Jack Turner left the cabin with that uneasy promise. Daniel had hoped Jack's silence would buy them time, weeks, maybe even months, to raise the kittens safely. But deep down, he knew how the mountains worked. Secrets didn't settle here. They rolled downhill, picked up speed, and landed where they caused the most trouble. When the knock sounded, steady, official, unmistakable, Daniel felt cold spread through him in a way no storm ever had. He opened the door slowly. A white SUV idled in the clearing. On the door, the emblem of the Wyoming Wildlife Service glinted in the pale sunlight. Standing on the porch was a man in his mid-30s, dark hair trimmed neatly above sharp eyes. His jacket bore the name Officer Logan Price. Morning, sir, Logan said, voice polite but authoritative. We received a report of unusual animal activity on this side of the ridge. Do you mind if I come in and ask a few questions? Daniel's throat tightened. What kind of activity? Juvenile bobcats, Logan said. Possibly orphaned, possibly injured. Sightings near human dwellings. Daniel kept his face still. Strange time of year for that. That's why I'm here. Logan paused, studying Daniel's expression with unnerving precision. May I come inside? This was it, the moment everything collapsed. Daniel stepped back. Logan entered, one foot, then the other, and stopped dead. Molly lay on a blanket beside the hearth, 3 bobcat kittens sprawled around her like mismatched puzzle pieces. The bold male atop her shoulder, the sleek female batting at her tail, and the smallest curled beneath her chin like a fragile shadow. For a heartbeat, the room was silent. Then Logan whispered, I'll be damned. He crouched down slowly, not like a threat, but like a man witnessing something he didn't quite believe. The kittens stiffened, eyes wide, but Molly did not move except for her tail, which thumped once against the floor. A warning, a greeting, both at once. She's protecting them, Logan said, still staring. She found them in the storm, Daniel said quietly. Brought them back. Saved them. Logan exhaled slowly. Mr. Harris, you understand this is highly illegal. Possession of native predators without permit. Cross-species imprinting, sheltering wildlife without reporting. He stopped. His voice softened. but I've never seen anything like this." He reached a hand toward Molly, palm down. She sniffed it, then lowered her head. Permission granted. One of the kittens chirped, indignant at the newcomer. The smallest didn't move much, but its breaths were steady, a victory earned with long nights and worry-filled dawns. Logan stood and faced Daniel. "I need the full story." So Daniel told him everything: the disappearance, the storm, the 3 days of dread. Finding Molly nearly frozen, wrapped around the kittens like a living shield. Nora's help, Jack's warning, the fragile miracle growing stronger in his cabin. By the time he finished, Logan wasn't wearing the expression of a man who intended to confiscate animals. He looked conflicted. Professional duty wrestling with something more human. "These kittens are bonded," Logan said. "Deeply. That's extremely rare between species." "They'll die if you take them," Daniel said quietly. Logan didn't dismiss the plea or brush it aside. He looked back at Molly and the kittens for a long moment before speaking again. "I'm not here to tear apart something that shouldn't even exist," he said finally. "But I can't ignore protocol either. I need to make calls." Daniel nodded, hesitant but grateful. Before Logan could speak again, a sharp meow echoed from the window. The bigger male, always the bold explorer, had climbed onto the sill and was staring outside, tail flicking. Then Daniel saw what the kitten saw. Tracks, fresh ones, large, deep, distinct. He felt his stomach drop. "Wolf," Logan turned sharply. "They come near here often?" "Not this close," Daniel said. "Not in daylight." Molly stood up suddenly, nudging the kittens behind her with an urgency Daniel hadn't seen since the storm. Her ears flattened. A low growl rumbled in her chest. The bold male pressed himself against her flank, trembling. Then something moved in the trees, gray fur slipping between shadows. Logan swore. "We should move them inside a room." "No," Daniel said. "If a wolf's this close, it's not after us." Logan finished the thought. "It's after them?" The female kitten hissed, tiny but fierce. The scratching noise at the window came again, closer this time. Logan reached for the tranquilizer pistol holstered at his belt. "I'll step out, stay with Molly, and keep the kittens behind her." "Don't shoot unless you have to," Daniel said. Logan nodded once and slipped outside, closing the door firmly behind him. Daniel crouched beside Molly, placing his hand on her back. She leaned against him, a silent acknowledgement that they were in this together. Minutes passed like hours. Daniel could hear murmured commands, the crunch of snow under Logan's boots, the distant echo of a bark. Then, silence. Too much silence. Daniel moved toward the door, barely breathing. Suddenly, Logan's shout ripped through the quiet. "Harris, get out here, quick!" Daniel grabbed his coat, yanked the door open, and ran outside. 20 yards from the cabin, 2 kittens, Bolt and the female, were clinging to a fallen tree, claws dug into the bark. Beneath them, a large gray wolf circled, muscles coiled in predatory rhythm. "How'd they get out?" Daniel demanded. "The gap in your enclosure," Logan said. "They squeezed through." The wolf snarled, teeth bared. Without thinking, without hesitation, Daniel acted. Training took over. He grabbed a flare from the emergency box by the door, struck it against the metal bracket, and hurled it into the snow near the wolf. The bright burst of light hissed and cracked. The wolf recoiled, but didn't retreat. Molly barked behind him, old, hoarse, but determined. She limped forward, positioning herself at Daniel's side. "No," Daniel said, grabbing her collar. "Stay." But Molly didn't stay. She stepped forward again, growling deep and low, eyes fixed on the wolf. The storm had nearly killed her, but this was different. These were her kittens, and she would not let anything take them. Logan shouted, "Now!" and fired a tranquilizer dart. The dart struck the wolf's shoulder. The animal snarled, staggered, then collapsed slowly onto the snow. Daniel raced to the fallen tree, pulling the kittens into his coat. They trembled violently, but they were alive. Back inside, Daniel placed them gently beside Molly. They clung to her immediately, tiny bodies shaking with leftover terror. Molly sniffed each one, checking, counting, comforting. Logan leaned against the door frame, breathing hard. They almost didn't make it. Daniel met his gaze. They need her, they need protection, and they need time. Logan looked at Molly curled around the kittens. An old golden dog shielding 3 wild creatures who trusted her more than nature ever intended. He exhaled slowly. I'll make the calls, and I'll fight for this family. For the first time since the storm, hope didn't feel fragile. It felt real. Danger had come for them, and together, man, dog, officer, and 3 little wild hearts, they had faced it down. But the hardest decisions still waited ahead, and the world outside the ridge hadn't given up on them yet. Winter loosened its grip slowly that year, as though the season itself were reluctant to let go. Snow still clung to the north ridge, and icy winds swept through the pines, but patches of earth, dark, stubborn, alive, began to emerge in thin crescents around the cabin. For Daniel, time passed in a rhythm marked not by calendars or clocks, but by the steady growth of 3 young bobcats who are no longer the fragile creatures carried in from the storm. Bolt grew first, long legs, strong shoulders, a confidence that radiated from him like heat. He scaled the enclosure walls with the ease of a natural climber, and every time Daniel walked him outside, he scanned the tree line as though already imagining a life beyond it. The female, Sierra, found her wildness in silence, moving with a grace that startled even Logan, who'd begun visiting weekly to document their progress. And then there was Dusty, still smaller than the others, still carrying the slight hitch in his step from the old wound, still glued to Molly in a way that made Daniel's chest ache. Dusty didn't run ahead or scout branches or test the fence like the others. He walked at Molly's side, leaning into her leg when the world felt too big. At night, he slept curled under her chin, tucked so close he disappeared into her fur. Nora said it was imprinting. Logan said it was instinct. Daniel said nothing, because he recognized devotion when he saw it. He'd lived his life with it. By the time the Wildlife Service issued the temporary rehabilitation permit, weeks had passed. Logan had fought for it harder than Daniel expected. He brought photographs, footage from the night with the wolf, medical notes from Nora. He argued that removing the kittens now would cause catastrophic psychological regression and possible fatal stress. His words, not Daniel's. It worked, but the permit came with a condition, one that settled over the cabin like a quiet storm. When the kittens were ready, they would be released into the wild, all of them if possible. Daniel accepted it. He didn't argue. He knew what wild animals were meant for, even if his heart felt heavier each time he looked at Dusty sleeping against Molly's chest. We'll give them everything they need, Nora had told him. Skills, confidence, strength, and when the time comes, you'll know which ones are ready. And if one isn't? Daniel had asked. Nora had hesitated. Then we trust Logan to help us make the right call. The months that followed were a strange mix of joy and dread. Daniel built play structures outside the cabin, logs, ramps, stones, and old tires to encourage the kittens to climb, leap, and stalk. Bolt mastered everything first. Sierra followed closely, her movements sleek and precise. Dusty took longer, always slower, always cautious, but determined. Logan brought tracking tools and scent training kits. Nora brought enrichment toys and protein-rich diets. Together, the 3 humans taught the kittens how to be what nature designed them to be: predators, survivors, hunters. But Molly taught them something different. How to rest, how to trust, how to return. Even as they grew bolder in the forest, Bolt and Sierra always circled back, brushing against Molly's side before bounding off again. Dusty rarely left her side at all. Then came the day Daniel had been dreading. Late spring sunlight draped the ridge in gold when Logan returned with a clipboard under his arm and a look Daniel had learned to read, gentle, careful, preparing for something difficult. "They're ready," Logan said. Daniel glanced toward the clearing. Bolt was crouched low, stalking a squirrel with professional precision. Sierra was perched on a log, tail twitching. Dusty lay in the grass, head resting on Molly's paw. "Bolt and Sierra are strong enough," Logan continued. "Their hunting instincts are fully developed. Their tracking is sharp. They're confident on their own." Daniel nodded, throat tight. He had expected this, prepared for it. It didn't make it easier. "And Dusty?" he asked softly. Logan looked toward the smallest kitten, then back at Daniel. "Dusty could survive out there, technically. He's healthy enough, but that doesn't mean he should." Nora stepped out of the cabin then, wiping her hands on her jeans. She'd arrived earlier, wanting to be present for whatever happened. "I agree with Logan," she said gently. "Dusty's bonded too deeply. To Molly. To this place. To you." Daniel let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "So, he can stay?" he asked, afraid to hope too openly. Logan nodded. "He can stay, under observation, with periodic check-ins. A resident wildcat, as the permit calls it." The weight in Daniel's chest loosened. Slowly, cautiously, like a rope untangling. They released Bolt and Sierra 2 days later. It happened at dawn, when the air was crisp and the forest smelled of pine and thawing earth. Daniel carried the crate alongside Logan and Nora, Molly walking slowly behind them with Dusty pressed to her side. When the crate door opened, Bolt leapt out first, bounding across the clearing with a confidence that made Daniel smile despite the ache in his heart. Sierra followed more cautiously, pausing to look back at Molly before slipping toward the trees. The 2 young bobcats stood at the edge of the forest, silhouettes against the rising sun. They sniffed the wind, exchanged a low chirp, wild, soft, familiar, and then disappeared into the shadows. Molly sat down, watching the place where they had vanished. Dusty pressed himself tighter against her, as if anchoring her to the ground. Daniel knelt beside her. "They'll come back," he whispered, "when they're ready." Summer crept across the ridge in patient brush strokes. Time softened its edges, leaving behind something bittersweet but peaceful. Bolt returned first, 2 weeks after the release, standing on a boulder across the clearing, watching the cabin with regal stillness before slipping away again. Sierra visited days later, weaving silently between the trees. They didn't come close, they didn't stay long, but they came back. And Daniel understood then what Nora meant about 2 lives, wild and home, woven into a balance the mountains rarely allowed. The cabin felt different now, not empty, not quiet, not haunted. It felt lived in, alive. Dusty trotted in and out freely, hunting for hours before returning to curl beside Molly and steal whatever patch of sunbeam she'd claimed. Molly aged gently. Her limp grew more pronounced, her naps deeper, but her eyes were bright, full of purpose and peace. She had found something in those kittens that grief had taken from her, a reason to stay, to wake, to fight. And Daniel, standing at the window one cool autumn evening, watching Dusty groom Molly's ear as the sun set over the ridge, felt something he never thought he'd feel again. Home, not the kind built from walls and wood, the kind built from belonging. His phone buzzed then, something rare in his quiet life. A text from his son, Evan. "Dad, I'd like to come up soon. I miss you. And I want to meet Molly. Daniel stared at the screen for a long moment before a slow smile broke across his face. He turned toward the door. Molly stood there, tail wagging gently, Dusty perched beside her like a spotted shadow. "Well, girl," he murmured, "looks like our family's about to grow again." He opened the door. Molly stepped inside. Dusty followed. And for the first time in years, Daniel felt the path ahead stretch open, not into emptiness, but into possibility. A life rebuilt, not despite the storm, but because of it.